All right, we'll go ahead and get started because I'm sure a lot of people will either join as they come or be watching the recording. And just as a reminder, we are recording today and we will be uploading this recording to our YouTube video where you can watch it again at your leisure. So I just want to start with a big thank you to everyone who joined us yesterday. Today's our virtual webinar, but yesterday we had an in-person event at San Francisco State where we got to show the results and show the designs, and all the project partners got to get together. So it was a really nice part of the project to be in person, and at the end of the day when we're talking textiles and clothing, just feeling them and seeing them in person adds a whole different level of appreciation for all the hard work and the people who involved. So a big thank you. And just as a little background, so my name is Joanne Brash. I'm with the California Product Stewardship Council, and speaking with me today is Connie Lasowitz from CBU Production and also a professor emeritus from San Francisco State. We're going to talk today about a project that we have in San Francisco. It's been funded by the San Francisco Department of the Environment through their Zero Waste grants. And this particular project was a pilot project that brought together a lot of different partners involved in clothing collection, sorting, repair, redesign. And at the end of the day, we're going to hear from all of our project partners who are here with us today. And we're going to learn about this innovative pilot project that we weren't doing anything mind-blowing, right? Repairing your clothes has been happening forever. But really, the ultimate goal of this project was to show what's possible at a scalable level and to show some of the businesses that are already established in the San Francisco area who are ready to participate and offer sustainability services to extend the life cycle of our clothing.
And as was brought up yesterday, we were also looking at job futures. And the jobs that are available, if we look at the opportunities that exist for us to fund within this industry.
Absolutely. So the partners for this project are really important, and without each of them, we wouldn't have such success as we did. So again, a big thank you to our funder, San Francisco Department of the Environment, through their Zero Waste grants. We had 3 project partners who were leads in the project, who had all really specific roles in diverting the garments from the landfill, getting them into reuse and repair, and analyzing the information that we collected. So again, I'm from the California Product Stewardship Council. We're a nonprofit, and our mission is to help create waste diversion programs that don't cost burden businesses and consumers, and puts the responsibility on the original producers of the product. We also had Goodwill San Francisco Bay, which when the project started was just the San Francisco chapter, but they have since merged with 2 other chapters. So we're really excited in the next few weeks in October. They have a big merger event called the Week of Goodwill. And during that week of events, we'll also be showcasing this pilot project. And third, we have Connie from CBU. Connie, do you want to take a moment to describe yourself?
Sure. So I was my background is within the garment industry for my career, and as an emeritus faculty, I am now an advocate through CBU Productions for helping people understand the true value of their clothing.
Thank you. And so we found 3 vendors to help us with our repair services. We had Designing a Difference, who did repairs and redesigns. We had Savvy Green Cleaners, which did a lot of the cleaning and spot removal. And then we had San Francisco State. A big thank you to the Department of Apparel Design, who really helped and put a lot of their own time into helping with major redesigns. So a big thank you to everyone involved, and we'll go into a little more detail in a few slides. So San Francisco Department of the Environment is the lead agency in the city and county of San Francisco who takes on waste and recycling issues as well as the management. So through their Zero Waste grant, we applied, and through a competitive process, this project won a 2-year grant. And in those 2 years, we not only did the repairs, but to launch this pilot, there was a lot of background work. So for example, we did a big call for designers. We made a big list of textile vendors, which we'll talk about later, so that we knew as we picked our vendors to participate, they were meeting all the laws, but also offered services that were unique and really showcasing what we want to achieve with a circular economy for textiles and clothing. The California Product Stewardship Council, we are a small but mighty team. So there's 6 of us staff doing a lot of product types. So when I'm not working on textiles, I'm working on solar panels, marine flares, propane cylinders. But we really focus on the hard to manage products in our waste stream. We are funded primarily by cities and counties and their waste authorities, because for the last 100 years, our waste managers just deal with whatever materials show up. And as our waste stream became larger and the materials became more complicated, our waste managers really needed help creating programs that were not going to be funded by the consumers, because we already pay really high garbage rates. And the more programs you add, you risk raising those garbage rates. So it's through cities and counties, engagement with CPSC. As you can see, most of the state funds us, and also our private business sponsors. At the end of the day, as we create more programs, we want to create sustainable ones that get the producers engaged, because they've been profiting off these products, but yet the end of life is paid for, by the waste managers and the consumers through our garbage rates. So in the future, looking forward, we want more programs that offer the services to really not only divert the materials, but get them into the preferred services. So repair, over recycling, over landfill. That's what we call the waste hierarchy. CPSC is leading 6 textile-specific pilot projects throughout the state, and these are all locally funded. So they're funded by cities and counties who've identified textiles as a problematic material and needed help to characterize and understand the extent of the problem. Once we've established, our baseline evidence and data, then we move forward into creating programs and passing policies at the local or state level, which we'll talk about soon. But here's the 6 projects that have been really helping CPSC understand the problem of textiles. In 2020, we worked with Goodwill and we audited the garments that were not sold in retail, but before they were baled. We found that a lot of them were high quality, but the labeling and the fiber content was not conducive to successfully sorting for end-of-life management. And what I mean by that is our tags are not regulated to require fiber content listing if it's under 10%. But some of our recyclers cannot take a 3% contamination. So there's a gap in information in what's presented on our labels and the information that's needed to actually recycle those materials.
And it's the federal FTC, Federal Trade Commission, that regulates those. It's not a company that decides, I want to do this or I want to do that, although there is some of that that's happening now.
Absolutely, which also makes it challenging to pass new laws at the state level because the labels are federally regulated. So today we're going to talk about the San Francisco Repair Project, but we do have other projects in Southern California, including the City and County of Los Angeles. Our reports have just been released for those projects. And those projects were a little bit different than San Francisco because they were more rooted in pre-consumer, so industrial waste and commercial textile waste. It was also much more focused on recycling because we were dealing with more of the scraps and unusable materials. Then we also worked with the County of Alameda to expand our textile handlers map. where I'll talk about that later in the presentation, but basically mapping out the leaders who are already working on textiles. So our map takes it down to the artist level. Are they doing beautiful visible mending? Are they specializing in leather or quilt repair? So as we move forward, we would love to expand that map and expand our projects, really looking at the businesses involved in textile diversion. And the last one was an audit of a curbside program. A lot of people think that the solution to textile recycling is to start collecting it at the curb with your other products. And we've known from experience in San Francisco and also some recent audits in Castro Valley that the contamination rate is just really high. We found that when you collect materials at the curbside, people assume it's the non-usable. So it's really going to be focused on unusable, contaminated, stained textiles, which don't have true processing available and are not funded well enough to ensure that they get into the proper processing. I will know that San Francisco did try some curbside textile recycling quite a few years ago, and it was commingled. So they told to put your textiles in a bag in your blue bin, but what happens when those bags open or rip? They mix with your foodware containers and your detergent containers. And the textiles are soft, so they absorb, they tangle in the machines with the hard plastic, and they're combustible. So it was a recipe for disaster where the volume of textiles that was collected, very little actually made it into recycling due to the contamination. And when they switched to appointment-based pickups, the cost per pickup was just too high. So it's through pilots like that and local governments' attempts for programs that we're really being pushed at the state level to create a more equitable program for what we call source-separated waste streams. That means it never commingles with your other plastics, and it stays as a separate product in a separate stream. So how do we create a source-separated program for textiles in a manner that doesn't increase everyone's garbage rates? So, and part of solving this issue and proposing policy resolutions, CPSC has created a Textile Recovery Advisory Committee. As you can see, we have multiple stakeholders involved, including local government, nonprofits, collectors, waste haulers, big brands. And what we do as a committee is really look at some of the issues that California is facing with textile collection and recycling, and proposing policy solutions and giving advice to CPSC on what the meanings of these pilot projects are and how we can translate the results into meaningful change. And so CPSC, like I said, our mission is to create new programs and ones that are sustainable and co-funded or at least fully funded by the industry. What happens when you have pollution and you have problems that are happening in our environment and in our economy associated with products is we have privatized the profits and socialized the problems. And if we as a community are expected to clean up textile waste, remove PFAS and microfibers from our water, design greener products, we just don't have enough power in the sense that we're not the ones designing the products. And it gets really expensive if you don't engage the industry who originally created the products and the problem. Our other partner who was instrumental in this project was Goodwill. So Goodwill San Francisco Bay was our primary collector and clothing partner in this project. And what was really nice about working with Goodwill San Francisco is they were already a leader in sustainability. They've been around for a long time, already working on diverting goods from the landfills. So not just textiles, they are really major collectors and reuse leaders for electronics, furniture. They were the first in the nation to create an electric truck program, which has since been replicated by more thrifts and even more Goodwills because they were able to show a reduction in their impact and ultimately saving money as the gas rates went up. And so Goodwill's business model really supports creating more jobs, creating more opportunities to, continue to collect, but also to get involved in solving some of the problems that are associated with the products they collect. We do have two representatives from Goodwill today on the call. They're here to help us answer questions if they arise. So feel free to use the chat if you have questions or if anything arises. So now I'm going to hand it to Connie, who's going to talk a little bit about her role and some of the other vendors in the project.
In 2000, about 15 years ago, when I co-authored the first edition of Sustainable Action, this book that you're seeing on the left here, the person who wrote the foreword for that book was Yinat Chenard. No, I'm not saying from Patagonia. Yinat Chenard. How come I'm not? Anybody out there who can say the name of the former owner of Patagonia?
Is it Yvonne Chouinard?
Thank you very much. So if you can think of the action that he's done at this point in time, years later, what he did with his company, most recently, understanding that his business is not about just making material, making textiles, making product and putting out there. Now he's trying to say, don't buy it if you don't need it. And then he started the take back and repair and of product. And now he's taking further action by saying, what am I going to do with the funding and who owns this company? The earth owns this company. So I'm an advocate and have been an advocate for the idea of us understanding the true value of what we have, and that rather than saying, well, they're doing this or Goodwill's not doing it right, or Forever 21 is just making cheap clothing. We are the people that are making the purchases. We are the people that have a decision making of what we already own, and understanding and asking the questions. That's what CPU Productions is about. If we then look at faculty at San Francisco State, although I'm no longer there, I reached out to current faculty members because we were looking for always the next generation of people that really have the skill and are looking to embrace an understanding of what skills they need going forward on their resume. So we started the project at the end of the semester last year with Nancy Martin, faculty at State, and she had several students that took the project on. And then this semester we have two classes, which is about 70 students that will be engaged in what Goodwill has given to them, kindly given to them, with the idea of what can you remake, can you do with these to make them saleable in a new way for people, to really more creatively understand, wow, I don't need to go to the store and buy new fabric for this. I can make, as we saw yesterday, I can make from a pair of pants, I can make a jumper for my kids. I can put the patch in the right place to repair. So that's what we're doing with students from the Failing Interiors, Nutrition and Apparel Department, more specifically Apparel Design and Merchandising at San Francisco State, where we had the event yesterday. And then Rebecca Kahua has a business called Designing a Difference. She was an undergraduate and a graduate student at San Francisco State and has opened up a factory where her mission is not just in the clothing, because she's done other things in the food industry also, and she does drives for people collecting and donating food to people, but also training people with a skill so that they can get a job. And she is the one that's working with this project to work with her staff, Designing a Difference, on making a difference with the garments that they're giving through repair or redesign. Some of the garments don't need as much repair. They've been tagged by Goodwill with there was a stain here, or there was a something that was just dirty. And I think it, again, thinking about what each of us that are on this call and are looking at this video, what do we give to Goodwill? Is it always clean? Is it always in great shape? Probably not. And so what Savvy Cleaners, who's a green certified cleaner in San Francisco, one of two in the city, I believe, what she was able to do was to clean the garments so that the value of them did increase because of that. But again, it comes back to us thinking about filling a bag up, giving Goodwill and going, oh, I feel really good about that. I'm asking each of us to question what we do give to our service industries with our textiles. And do we need to? This is the, excuse me, the 5-step project that Joanne developed and that we went through, and we were identifying a value for the clothing because what working with Goodwill and working with Inga, it was the idea that these would be selling on their online market, not in the stores, because it's the customer that they have online is looking for a different type of product that might have a different type of value to it or appreciate and spend more for that. So those were the items that were identified, were step 2 segregated for either repair, redesign, or cleaning. And then we needed to locate these. And I think Joanne will go into the idea of our challenge was finding people that have a garment manufacturing license, because that is the law in the state of California, that if you're repairing for resale, you need to have a garment manufacturer's license. And then we were returning the garments to Goodwill for the tags that you saw at the beginning of our presentation, and then doing a cost benefit analysis of the project. As the project is still going on, that is still occurring.
So we're going to go through each of these steps in a little more detail. And I see a couple really good questions coming in, and we'll hold those for the end, but keep them coming. So as Connie mentioned, the first step was to really identify the damaged garments. So working with the e-tailing, the e-commerce team, we had a little bit of a more controlled system. So once they get to the e-commerce team, they've already been deemed worth $45 or higher. And then the e-commerce team went and identified which ones could not be sold as is, or if they were sold as is, would need to be called out, would need to say slightly damaged or small stain in the armpits, for example. And so once we diverted these garments, we put them into 3 categories. Even though there were 2 vendors, there were 3 different categories. One of them was cleaning. And we chose Savvy Cleaners because there are only 2 certified green cleaners in San Francisco. So the San Francisco Department of the Environment has this wonderful green business program where they go through the categories with each business, and if they meet certain criteria, they get certified. So there are 2 cleaners that are certified green, meaning they use non-toxic cleaning products. They don't use the same processes like dry cleaning, which tends to have some more harsh chemicals. So Savvy Cleaners was our first choice. And she really excelled in not only all over cleaning, but really working on spot cleaning and identifying which stains really can't be removed. At the end of the day, all of our vendors were instructed to reject the items that they knew they just couldn't fix in the allotted amount of budget. So just because we sent them there doesn't mean they actually got repaired. But we learned a lot in what's capable of being cleaned with the right chemicals and the right skills. And some just really are not cleanable. The other vendor was doing repair and redesign. So when we say repairs, we're not talking like one little button, we're really talking about, multiple types of damages. whether it was pilling and a hole, or, there was a missing button plus, a rip in the seam. So identifying which ones needed significant repairs and the ones that needed to be redesigned. So the qualifying criteria for a garment to go into redesign would be something like the damage is too big or it was rejected for an opportunity for simple cleaning or simple repair. Maybe the style was really not nice, but the material and the fabric itself was very nice, thick and high quality. Or maybe it was a recognizable brand that we wanted to keep it recognizable, but making it a new product because the damage was so extensive.
And the design eye is interesting because, as Joanne was saying, if someone, let's say, a stain doesn't come out, there was an item that there was a stain on a sleeve of a jacket and the stain didn't come out. It was tagged, but the jacket was then repaired, if you will, and the sleeves were shortened. So it became a short sleeve jacket. So it's also someone that can look at the items in another way and say, well, what can we do with this? And if, let's say, that the 3 buttons, well, I'm missing 2 buttons, well, I'll never get them to match, possibly taking all 5 of the buttons off and sewing all 5 more original or somewhat different looking button on that would bring up the value, but also brings up the cost of a simple repair.
Absolutely. And Connie brings up a really good point about having designers on your team. So Connie was one of the primary leads, has a background in design, but also having our vendors give us feedback. As someone representing the waste industry, we don't always have the same vocabulary and language or even ideas as a designer would, or someone who's been doing this for a long time. And similarly, working with Connie, what's possible and what's commonly, common knowledge as a designer. So when you're developing a team or you're developing a pilot, we always encourage to not only have the tail end of the stream, the waste identifiers and diversion, metrics, but really to bring on designers who can pull these materials through and get them back into use. So as we were conducting the repairs, well, not we, the vendors, one of the things Connie mentioned was our challenge with the repair and redesign. The way the laws are written in California, and this was a measure that was passed, I believe, in the mid-90s as a way to prevent as a way to prevent sweatshops, was anyone who's doing cutting, sewing, anything with scissors or needles to a textile or to a garment needs to have a garment manufacturer's license or a garment contractor's license. And the reason for this is because Goodwill was reselling these garments. So as individuals, if you and I wanted a garment repaired or even redesigned, this would not be a requirement. You can go to any alteration company, you can ask anyone off Instagram who's an artist to help you. But because there was the resale factor, meaning, Goodwill was going to be selling these items, it's in the law that we had to find a sewing vendor who had this license. And if we were doing this pilot in Los Angeles, I think we would have a lot more options of businesses that have this license. But in San Francisco, because there's not as big of a hub for manufacturing, our list of options was significantly smaller. It was less than 50 businesses in San Francisco have this license. So as we called each of them, our challenge was a lot of times you have that license because you're making large orders or you're servicing larger brands. So doing a project that had so much custom work or so much unknowns, because we didn't know what garments were going to be diverted the next week. We didn't know what kind of stains or damages. There had to be an element of flexibility and adaptiveness by our vendors. So we were really happy to find the 2 vendors we did who understood not only the importance of the project, but scoped their time and scoped their proposal to adapt with the products that entered the program. Both of them are located in the city of San Francisco. Both of them are available for ongoing contracts or business proposals from other businesses. So feel free to contact them. They were great vendors to work with. And actually, one of the things that surprised me was the fast turnaround. I mean, we were sending garments out one week and getting them back the very next week. Obviously, redesigning took the longest time, but even those were having a 2-3 week turnaround. So we were able to get the products listed much quicker, so we could really see what's most successful and what's worth it. So the fourth step, once the garments arrived back at Goodwill's e-commerce location, they were tagged and they were listed either on their eBay listing or through their website has a separate e-commerce opportunity. And one of the challenges we found was since they no longer had to call out the damages or have any disclaimers, there was harder to communicate the story. It was harder to communicate everything this garment had been through before it got to the listing. Because what we found, especially with the online shoppers, especially people who are interested in sustainability, is they want to know that story. They want to know, what makes this garment different and what makes it sustainable. And for us, it was the landfill diversion and the added repair services. So one of the things we decided to do mid-project, when we realized the story wasn't getting communicated enough, was we created these special hang tags. And these hang tags say mended with care, but they also on the backside have a QR code. And that QR code takes the consumer to a website that has background on the pilot project and a link to the entire eBay store that has everything from this project. So in just a few slides, and we can put the link, Yalin, will you please put the link to the eBay listings in the chat? Which is really cool because even if you're not going to buy anything, you can see all the different garments that we've diverted from the landfill into resale. And it has been really successful.
And I think when we look later at the quantity of what we're working with, again, as a pilot project, working with an established vendor like Goodwill, what we're trying to do is open people's minds to the idea of what are the other findings that we can find out from this project that wasn't necessarily the intent. And in working with Goodwill, when Joanne was just explaining so eloquently the idea of trying to explain to people what the garment looked like, if you will, before, the idea now, I believe, is that if I have a garment that is not in 100% great shape, and if you will, there is a tear and a rip in it, Goodwill previously wouldn't sell those, but now is it possible if they say to the consumer, the armhole needs some repair, or there's only 2 buttons and not 5, the customer likes that information. It doesn't mean they will say, oh, Goodwill is leading me on. They'll say, oh, Goodwill's telling me what's going on, and I'm going to buy that garment still, and I'm going to repair it.
So the fifth step of the project was to really analyze kind of the costs and benefits of the project. And I will say it's ongoing. So, we'll probably have our final metrics in the new year, so maybe January or February. Once we've done all the repairs and we've gone through all the budget, we'll have the final metrics. So this is as of the end of August. So total, I believe it's been over 500 garments have been diverted into repair of one form or another. And then here we have the average cost. So the average cost of redesigning was about $45, but this does include the San Francisco State students who volunteered their time. So I would say the average is probably a little higher when you're paying full-time redesign services. The cost of repairing was about $52, which might seem a little high, but again, we're talking about multiple damages. We're talking about small women-owned businesses that are certified, and it shows an opportunity of where it could be improved. So we think as a team, some of the opportunities to reduce these costs would be something like hiring garment workers to be part of the Goodwill staff, or incentivizing businesses like Renewal Factory or sorry, Renewal Workshop to come to the California to partner with these thrifts to scale up a larger scale of these garment repairs. And another opportunity to really save costs, because at the end of the day, businesses will always be more efficient and more cost effective than a government project. So if this is kind of the high point, and our goal wasn't to do it as cheap as possible, our goal was to do it as best as possible, making sure we followed all the laws, making sure we maximize the opportunity for resale and resale pricing. But as you can see, the average listing price was about $20, and the average sale price, because it's an auction, was about $31. So they are selling for more than their listing. And because this is an average, we're not capturing some of the highs and lows. So for example, we had a couple really great vintage items that were listed, for $40, but maybe sold for $300. So it so far has been really successful, especially knowing that there are opportunities to improve the cost efficiency. And some of the successes, in addition to actually doing these repairs and diverting from landfills, was that we got to support these businesses. And at the end of the day, every community has dry cleaners, and a lot of the communities here in California have garment workers of some form or another. So really, again, empowering and funding these businesses who are the front line for sustainability and getting these garments into perpetual reuse. We really wanted to inspire more students, designers, and brands that here we have a really good source of material feedstock for your sustainable collections. Sourcing your items or your textiles from, say, a damaged stream that doesn't have resale value as is a really good opportunity to, get more upcycling and more repair into scalable businesses and brands. And at the end of the day, we really wanted to just acknowledge awareness for the value of our clothes. Even though with fast fashion, we are seeing the cost of clothing go lower and lower, it's the cheapest clothing has ever been. The value of quality fibers and the value of materials that are worth repairing is really what's going to help the consumers understand their role in landfill diversion and reducing our textile waste.
And we are, and that's something that it was so great to be on this project and work with everybody and understand how we are our own best advocates. And what we're saying here is the same. It's not saying don't buy clothing, and it's not saying don't support government and don't go to Goodwill. It's saying be conscious of the decisions that you're making and aware. And now going on websites is there's a plethora of information, and that gets us into the idea of greenwashing and people saying what they're doing when they're really not doing it. But it's us first looking at what we already own, I believe, and what we can pass on, or what we can make the pants into the shorts, or a plethora of other opportunities, and working with local community. This was a community project, and I know one of the questions came up about putting this into another state and how we can do it. And I think it's a connection of people in a community that can make it work. And we must do that. We must.
And really circling back to what we started this webinar, talking about the jobs. I mean, the opportunities, like Connie mentioned, are huge. Renewal Factory, which is a company.
Joanne just froze. They were out of Oregon, and what they were doing was work with vendors to bring materials from vendors in, and they were repairing it, and then they were reselling it. And so what happened is that so many companies wanted to be doing that she then expanded And she's now sold the business so it could grow because people are wanting to do this. And she is still engaged with the company, but she's also working on opening up another business in Europe. So it's the same business, but another, there's Joanne back again. So it's important to understand that the consumer wants this, and there is an industry and there is a business for it. She was in Cascade Locks, Oregon, and I was able to visit her facility. And again, job creation. She created jobs for people to repair, and it's a wonderful factory.
Thank you for saving me. My power randomly went out, of course. Yellen, do you mind sharing the screen or the slides? It's on the server under the webinar. But thank you so much for saving me, Connie.
Sure.
I'm joining from my phone. So once we get those slides shared back up, we will be able to discuss in more detail kind of our next steps for this particular pilot project. In the meantime, did anyone have any questions on the 5 steps that we took for the pilot project? Thank you, Yellen. And you can go straight to slide 26. Thank you. So our next steps, I mean, this is a temporary project. So a pilot, they're really great for, you know, learning the baseline, establishing what's possible. But at the end of the day, what we really need is ongoing programs. So really our next steps are to incentivize more companies to offer repair or offer redesign. Yellen, slide 26, please. We want to improve our recovery systems. So at the end of the day, what do we do with the materials that is just not usable? And we're stuck in the situation where we don't want to put them to the thrifts and we don't want to burden the other collectors, but we have no other place to send them for recycling or for servicing. So we want to improve our material recovery systems, especially in a manner that supports the thrifts. They've been doing a lot of the collecting for so long, and they're seeing more and more damaged goods and more low quality fast fashion. So that cut into their profits and ultimately increase their waste. And if it's not getting landfilled here in California, there's a good chance these damaged, unusable items are going to be landfilled in another country, most likely a secondhand market. So anything that we can do to prevent dumping in landfills far and wide is the win in terms of waste diversion. So we're really excited to continue supporting local businesses and expanding the government's work with textile repair and repurposing. Next slide. As I mentioned earlier, CPSC is developing a handler's map. So those of you who know CPSC, we're a little bit famous for our maps. We've created a statewide map for where to dispose of your medicine, or we've created a statewide map on where you can find reusable propane services. So a very logical next step as we're moving product types and looking at opportunities to get involved in conveying this information to the public, we've created a textile handlers map. I will put a quick note, it's not complete. We've really only been able to map out the handlers in each of the grant areas. So we're currently fundraising, especially with some of the brands who want to get involved. Here's a really good opportunity to directly get yourself involved in funding and supporting these types of projects. So we're hoping the map will be public, if not by the end of the year, early 2023. And our goal is to make it really functional so that anyone using the map can look up what types of materials they have. Maybe it's you have a bunch of polyester uniforms or your cotton drapes that are damaged. So if we can add that level of functionality where you can search by fiber type or you can search by location, the ultimate goal is to identify these leaders, these champions of textile diversion. Next slide. So here are some of our policy priorities that have been identified by our advisory committee. So, like we've mentioned, our goal is to increase engagement of the producers, the waste managers, the consumers, to create more jobs, and ultimately to protect our environment and protect our consumers from, being burdened with what to do with these materials. And a quick shout out to fighting against toxics. People don't always realize that there are a lot of chemicals used in our clothing. There's microfibers, microplastics. Avoid glitter at all costs for your clothes. But here are some opportunities to address some of those specific problems. So just as a little background, part of what CPSC does, and once we have established these pilot projects, are to use the information to develop good, meaningful policies. Policies can be taken place at the local level, at the state level, or as we mentioned earlier, at the federal level. And here are some of the examples that our advisory committee feels would be really, did I disappear? Sorry. Good opportunities to address some of the problems. So talking about government purchasing, when we started looking at what textiles are the government buying, we saw that uniforms, rags, towels, and coveralls are some of the top products that are bought for textiles. But what's also unique is those products are considered really recyclable because they tend to have fewer embellishments and fewer fiber types. So really getting the government involved to buy greener products and textiles and to offer repair and recycling services for those textile products. We also want to develop more transparency and reporting so that we can understand the extent of the material flows and the true burdens of cost and how to alleviate those. And at the end of the day, one of the major things that CPSC really specializes in is extended producer responsibility. Extended producer responsibility is a very specific waste management program that is fully funded by the industry, but it's also managed by the industry. So with EPR programs, the materials never go to the state and the money never goes to the state. It's ultimately a industry funded and industry run program. And the philosophy is if they're going to pay for end of life management, they're going to want to reduce their production. They're going to design products that are easier to manage. And they're going to have feedstock for their sustainability goals. Most of the major brands for fashion and clothing have made sustainability goals. If they haven't, they're behind the trend. So if every brand wants to have recycled content by 2030, or every brand wants to start offering upcycled garments, it's through collaborative programs like EPR that we're not siloing costs so that the big companies get it easier than the smaller ones. EPR is the most equitable type of program because the costs are shared, but the access to the materials are then amplified for the brands that are paying in. So ultimately, it puts the brands in the driver's seat, which is a much better place to be than having the government run the program. Next slide. So there's a lot of good opportunities for everyone to get involved. And the first and foremost is to look at your own purchases. Looking into your own closet, or if you are in a government role, at the purchases of your department, and how can you improve which items you buy, and which items maybe could you apply your own repair services, whether you do it yourself or admittedly, I prefer to have someone else do them. I don't know how to sew, but there are a lot of opportunities as individuals to actually engage in these services. So we encourage you to look through in your community, finding these businesses that offer repair, redesign, and support them as best you can. You can design your own local pilot, and I know we have a question about Colorado because at the end of the day, these projects are funded by our local government. So keeping an eye out for grants
maybe waste diversion grants that are local or even at the state level. I know that textiles are really competitive. There are some grants coming down at the federal level through the infrastructure investment funds and also the Inflation Act. Both of those federal legislation are offering funding for recycling and landfill diversion. And I will note that we heard from the EPA that the infrastructure grants specifically have identified textiles as a priority product. And there are other ways to get involved in supporting CPSC in our work, such as this pilot or future legislation. Obviously, following us on social media, we actually put a lot of effort into our social media. But also, you can sign up for our listserv. We have a free listserv or we have a funders listserv. And that's where we send our calls to action and opportunities to get immediately involved, whether it's writing letters to the governor or signing on to support certain policies. That's where we send our information. But as individuals or as companies, we always encourage you to get involved in legislation and local ordinances, contacting your representatives and letting them know, waste is a problem and textiles is a major problem, especially if we want to protect our garment workers, our thrifts, and the secondhand markets from an unfair burden right now. Connie, do you have anything to add before we go to the next slide?
What I would say for everybody in terms of involvement, and there's some great chats over here about involvement, like Bianca at City College working with Macy's on a project of remaking. I think there's a lot of wonderful, and that's why it's great that everybody's even engaged here today on this, but the information today is at our fingertips. Before I buy from whatever vendor, I can go online and see what their policies are or see the factory that made that. If they don't have that information for me, if they say they don't know, then I won't buy from them. It is up to us. We must take action. We must.
Thank you. Next slide. So we're going to hold the rest of the time for questions, comments, and discussion. I'm working from my phone, but I do believe I have access to the chat from here. Bear with me.
So if when you go back to, if you start from the top, that Bailey had asked something about Goodwill and Colorado Mountains and Plains Fiber Shed as well. Yeah,
oh, yeah.
So Fashion Artisan. That's wonderful.
Thank you so much, Bailey. We appreciate your engagement.
That's wonderful.
And
if anybody else is out there from Colorado to help promote this for you.
And I think one of the biggest challenges is the funding, right? Because it takes time to manage these products and these programs. It takes time to get all the partners engaged, right? Like Goodwill had to change their labor and their steps, and finding a vendor who understood what do we mean by redesign, and finding a vendor, and transportation. People often forget how much transportation costs. Even though all our vendors were in San Francisco, it still costs money and time for someone to drive across town, pick them up. So grants are a really good opportunity to find funding for that, or even brand partnerships. So until good policy passes, finding the brands who are talking the talk and invite them to walk the walk with you.
I think the next one, in terms of would it make sense to have a cleaner or a repair shop within Goodwill? It's a fascinating question. It was one that we came up with and one that we asked. It also is, as Goodwill, who may want to comment on this, Inga is on the call, but the idea that this is a national organization that has their missions and their goals, and that is not within them for them to be doing that. And if you think of a space and the square footage and what's involved and the timing of this, possibly this is something that your local Goodwill store would be able to do. But I know from statistics that are out there with Levi's, So a vendor, you have to sell so much by square foot. Same with a Goodwill store to make it valuable because they have rent and utilities to pay. And when you're repairing something, although there's a price tag with that, your square footage is way down of what you're selling. So your dollar value, it's an interesting product and loss statement that you have to make that happen. But my hope, my desire is that more of us would be able to do this. Great.
Yeah, absolutely.
The same thing with dropping it off, and I'm sorry, dropping it off as if it, what if we said to who we were bringing it to, these are damaged, these need repair. What if we did that? Sorry, Joanne, I cut it.
No, that's great. So I see Yalin posted the eBay link. So that's a great opportunity to find all the different garments that have been listed. And it says, what if we got the government to pay for everything for the first few years, track the brands that we repair, and send them the bill? I love it. I love it. I think in some degree that would be kind of similar to how an EPR program would work. But instead of having the government send them the bill, it's usually a nonprofit running the program. So we call those PROs, producer responsibility organizations. And a pay as you go or pay as you produce would be a really interesting model. Typically, we design the brand payouts or pay-ins to be what we call eco-modulated fees. So instead of doing a standard, everyone pays, I'm just making this number up, but let's say it's 1 penny a garment. If every brand pays 1 penny a garment, yes, the fast fashion would be paying more because they sell more. But what if we modulated those fees so that the companies who are designing organic and monofibers, the brands who have repair services, pay less? Maybe they pay a half a cent, or maybe they pay zero if they have their own program. Or what if on the other side of the spectrum, we increase the price? So if there was glitter added or other chemicals that made it less recyclable, if there was, let's say, for example, dyes that were more hazardous, maybe those garments would pay 2 cents in. So, and it's through those eco-modulated fees that you can incentivize green design. So when you look at how green design is regulated in Europe, there are design standards and mandates that just wouldn't pass to the same level of impact here in California because of our political systems. And because typically with legislation, you don't want to tell the companies what they have to do. You want to incentivize them. So here at CPSC, we prefer the carrot over the stick. And it's if they're paying more to have poorly designed products, it's going to incentivize them to improve those designs. And similarly, if they're paying more because they're overproducing, because they pay that cent, whether it's sold or not, it might incentivize lesser production and really address that kind of overproduction aspect. There's a lot of oh, sorry, Connie, yeah?
No, go for it, go for it.
I see more comments on money and alterations and the cost of jobs, because at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, you're not gonna, what we found in this project is it really isn't worth it to fix the fast fashion, because those stains don't come out as well in those cheap fabrics, and they lose their shape really quickly. So just because you're fixing a seam doesn't mean it's still going to be as usable. So there's a lot of money in fixing and repairing, but there's also a lot of money in improving the designs and products to begin with.
Because, and I think it's looking at the original intent. My understanding is that if you're buying at a Forever 21 and stores of that type, for whatever fashion purpose or whatever it is that you're buying there, the intent is the garment is not being made to last for. 10 years or whatever, you know, multiple wears, multiple repair. That's not the intent of the item to begin with. So understanding that, and then maybe when they're having it, maybe schools could take on the concept of having swaps, you know, clothing swaps. I mean, it's understanding that we have a dilemma, a climate dilemma right now, and clothing in landfill is 4 to 5% of what we have to deal with, which may not seem like a lot, but it is, and it doesn't need to be there. When you think back to what Joanne was saying about if we bail things up and offshore them to other countries, why? Take responsibility for what we have done, and there are ways to do it. And as Ruby was saying here, or is it Bailey, the concept of people loving to see people sew. Yes. My son is in organic agriculture, regenerative agriculture. And when I go to Oregon to see him, I see this community of 20 to 40-year-olds who are out in the fields and they're working with their hands. And I'm saying to myself, we can have manufacturing facilities that are made up of 20 to 40-year-olds who can have their headphones in their ears. They enjoy sewing. They enjoy learning that way. Why do we have to think of this as people in a sweatshop not being paid a wage or in conditions that are not appropriate and being paid appropriately? Doesn't have to be that way. It's up to us to make the changes.
Next, I see a from Bianca, who is working with Macy's on some upcycling challenges. And I love to see these types of projects because you see the retailers getting involved because they, you know, right now, if they get burdened with an extra clothing or extra samples, that's a task for them. They have to find, you know, where to send those materials. And unfortunately, a lot of times they do end up in landfills because for whatever reason, they don't want to enter the market or enter the retail floor. So congratulations on that project, Bianca. We're really excited to hear about that. And the other comment that we see is about some of the government purchased textiles and how they're using prison labor to sew those. And absolutely, there are a lot of issues related to some of the supply chains, especially when you're talking about labor rights and access to safe and equitable work conditions. This would be a good time to call out SB 62, which was a bill that passed, was it last year or the year before? I think it was 2 years at this point. And it was a monumental bill in California because a lot of times the garment manufacturing facilities are circumventing minimum wage by offering what was called the piece rate. So the workers got paid per piece or per item that they sewed. And sometimes if they weren't fast enough or they weren't, you know, moving quickly enough, they would end up by piece rate making less than the minimum wage. So SB 62 abandoned and abolished the piece rate system and mandated that if you are employing someone to sew your garments, cut and sew your garments, they must be making minimum wage, which seems like common sense, but it's through policy changes that we can actually add those protections. So hopefully, you know, something in the future can really address some of the prison labor that's being used for some of the textiles and clothing manufacturing. Thank you for that, Bailey. So next we have a comment. Next cycle has an opening soon, and how there are more. Oh, great, Bailey. So Bailey offered a link to some of the prison labor issues. And then other opportunities for sewing. So Fall Raven is a backpack company. Cyclo SF is a textile chemical company. And so there's lots of opportunities for these companies. And as Bailey mentioned, they have budgets and they have sustainability goals. So really tapping into those specific opportunities until a statewide one comes, looking into those individual companies and holding them accountable. You know, whether it's through social media or direct emails, you can oftentimes communicate with these companies, whether it's your support, your interest, or even looking for other opportunities to engage.
There's also the concept we're hearing about inventory and the lack of inventory or the incorrect inventory. So what does a manufacturer do with the inventory that they have when they no longer need it? And in Alameda County, one of the things that they were doing with that inventory during COVID was giving it to the people that needed it in the school system or through the school system. So there is a lot of textile that doesn't have to become waste, because if you get it into the right hands, it can have a value. And so there's a lot of people that do this with backpacks at the beginning of the year, companies that donate backpacks and put garments or put whatever the needs are in the backpack. But there's a way we hear about clothing is a basic human need. And when it's cold, it can keep me warm. And when I'm wet, it can keep me dry. And I understand we have serious climate conditions going on in regions of the world right now. But we do have the possibility to take care of our own this way. And that would be through the local government, as Joanne was saying earlier, that we all can do this. I think that the question, Joanne, if you can talk more about textile shredding. And the question here is there a local shredder that you can bring fabric to bring it back to reuse?
So this is tricky because there used to be a lot. I think, in the 80s and 90s, there were a lot of textile shredding.
Yeah.
But for a couple of reasons, we don't see as many as we used to. One of them is the offshoring. So textile manufacturing in general definitely went abroad in the 80s and 90s. So our industry as a whole kind of shrunk. We also have really strict air quality regulations. So a lot of times with these shredders, especially if they're kind of low tech shredding technologies, they don't always contain the fibers and the chemicals. And so we have seen some close over the years just because they really just don't meet the air standards. It's sad because you see a lot of shredding in India, Pakistan, and Mexico. So we would hope if we are sending our materials there that they also protect the air and protect the workers breathing in those materials. But there are some. I don't want to say that it's completely empty, because through our established programs, we have found a couple shredders. So interesting enough, California has a mattress stewardship program, which is kind of a form of EPR. And we also have a carpet stewardship program at the state level. And both of those programs employ recyclers and collectors to shred and dismantle those products. And what we found, and mostly our LA pilot projects, was that textiles are a really similar fiber type as carpet and mattresses, right? So if you're shredding carpet and you find that it's nylon, and we have nylon recyclers here in California, they can easily take our nylon textiles. So there's a couple shredders that we know of that are part of the mattress program, particularly one in Ontario, California, down south. There's another one in Fresno, and they are scalable, meaning they already are taking in large volumes of mattresses and carpets. So working with textiles is an easy next step for them. And I would like to say, just kind of pointing out some of the carpet and mattress recycling, that because we have these EPR programs, we've incentivized businesses to come to California specific for those products. So I always like to use the example of EcoNeil, because that's a recycled nylon that is used in Stella McCartney's Eco line. It's used in Prada's Eco line, but that recycled nylon is made from California carpet. And they'll never tell you that in the marketing because they call it industrial plastics. But as firsthand knowledge, so now that everyone on this webinar is more educated on California-based programs, you can know that Prada and Stella McCartney are using carpet from California in their eco lines. And the reason they're using carpet from California and not carpet from any other state is because of our EPR program. Because we have these additional funds that help transport the materials, that help deconstruct the materials, these large brands are able to get order volumes, scalable volumes of the materials, and also ensure, an ongoing supply of these particular materials. So despite California's high costs of business and high costs of labor, we still see major companies coming to California specifically for waste and recycling because of our programs. So another good opportunity, if we want to find more shredders and more recyclers, a really good first step is to find those who are already participating with similar products.
And that, it's interesting. I know this happens with the shredding of paper because do I take the staples out? Do I take the paper clips out? Do they get stuck in the machine and then it costs more than it should? But with the shredding of materials, we have buttons, we have zippers, we have bar tacks, so all of that was also a cost factor with shredding. And then it's the study that the statistics that Joanne and I came out of when we were looking at garments from Goodwill at one point, and the number of fiber variations and fiber blends. Joanne, what was do you recall the number of fiber content names and then the blends that we found by looking?
44 unique fiber types, even though the industry says there's 10 to 15, we found 44, and there were 275 unique blends.
So is that, and you wonder then, well, where did the name come from? And so is this greenwashing or not greenwashing, or how someone is naming a fiber and they don't know, and all of that information. But this is why it also becomes more challenging to shred, to recycle back to original form. And there's a lack of understanding of the true value and the need to have this information.
Yeah, absolutely. And then last few comments from Bailey, which again, we really appreciate all your engagement, and we encourage everyone else on the call to keep on chatting and asking questions, is this comment about people willing to pay for community experiences that are regenerative. And we have seen a lot of investment, especially in the most recent announcements from FiberShed, is we do see investments in regenerative agriculture, natural fiber systems, because we know they're good for the economy, they're good for the environment, and they're good for our bodies. So when we talk about, the whole spectrum of textiles, which does include synthetics, designing experiences and designing programs that humanize, like Bailey was saying, humanize the experience and humanize the production factors. It's really one of those cultural shifts that we really are kind of supporting as best we can. And this really isn't just unique to textiles. When we look at our waste across product streams, whether it's your electronics or your plastics, to really understand not only the resources that got involved to make those, but the people. And when you look downstream at where these products end up, there's a human factor with that as well. If you take a little time to Google what's happening in Accra, Ghana, or if you look in the deserts of Chile, you see the accumulation of our burden. You see the accumulation of these textile products that no one took responsibility for. And when you compare the landfills in these countries compared to the landfills in California, they don't have the same regulations. So I always make the comment that in California, our landfills are beautiful and very well maintained compared to the rest of the world. We have really strict regulations on how to put the plastic liners and how to test the water from your landfill and how to ensure nothing's flying off the top of the landfills. But those protections are not as prominent in some of the other countries. So if we're not landfilling here and we're landfilling in another country, we're increasing the environmental and human exposures of those particular waste items. So we're really looking forward to a future of textile management that takes responsibility and puts that responsibility on the producers making the product, but also takes responsibility as a state and as a community for the waste we generate to ensure we're not burdening other countries who don't have the same systems and opportunities as we do here in California. Do we have any other questions or any other comments for someone who is interested?
I very much appreciate the comment of it being a cultural shift or a psychological shift. That is where we are, and we need to make that shift. We can't just have conversations anymore. We are past that point. And again, it's getting involved and opening up opportunities to people and seeing this as a great industry. And that's why we were back with the students again, and the student here that's working with Macy's, it's getting people involved. And so when you go out to your jobs, your expectation is, well, they're going to be caring about this. And when they're not, you say, well, I can bring my knowledge to you and I can help you make the change. So that's what it is. It is a cultural shift, the concept. And we were there before. If you look back historically, those that are in the industry, looking back to that, what people were wearing or what they were repairing or how long a garment lasted, it was the automation that kept going and going and going. And lo and behold, we're back. We're saying, okay, these things can be automated, but we can repair them, automatedly repair them. We're not there yet. That's where we need to go.
Absolutely. Yellen, do you mind sharing the last slide on the slide deck, please? Because I want to give everyone the opportunity to contact us afterwards. So here's Connie's information. Here's my information. You can also go to CPSC's website. We have a textile specific page, which has results from all the different pilot projects, some other articles that we've written on textile waste. And we really encourage everyone to get involved and to get in contact, because the opportunities are only growing from here for textile recovery. And we want to be leaders, but we also want to empower the other champions in this space.
Right. Very much so. And I would say you can go to cbuproductions.com and see some of my other work there. So, yeah, great conversations today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And we'll stay on for another minute or two in case more questions arise. But we hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your week, and keep an eye out for the final report for this project, which will hopefully come out in January or February. Thank you again, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you very much. I would also say share one item that you learned with one person today. They'll carry that on, and what you learned will grow. Be a part of the change.